Hey, so today we're going to talk about how other people perceive us or what we think their perception is. But the question is it really true? Probably not. So, how often do you go through the day and you say something or you do something, and then afterwards you think, what does that person think of me? What does that person say about me when I'm not around? And more often than not, the story we tell ourselves is that they think really poorly of us. They think that we're unintelligent, that we make bad choices as parents, that we make bad financial decisions. It's not a good story. And so, what we think is this horrible story that they're telling about us to themselves and to others is really probably not true. We think these things because of how we perceive ourselves to be, based on limiting core beliefs that we were taught as children based on adverse childhood experiences or childhood trauma. So, for example, when my girls were in preschool, every month they had a family project, and I would micromanage my kids to get them to have these picture perfect projects to hang in the hallway at school because I was so worried that if their project wasn't spot on perfect, what would the other parents say about me as a mom and as a former kindergarten teacher? And so what I realized is that I was zapping and sucking the life right out of my kids and taking the fun out of these projects, which the intent of the project was supposed to be fun. It wasn't intended to be stressful. And so what I was doing was I was giving my kids this perception that my mom doesn't think I'm smart enough. My mom doesn't think that my decisions are good. My mom doesn't trust the decisions that I make. And so really I was projecting that experience onto my kids from my own childhood experience. And so this experience often follows us into adulthood because we're not given positive messages as kids. So we're often said, oh, you're too loud, you're too this, you're too that. So then we start questioning ourselves and the way that we're showing up instead of honoring who we are at our core, our most authentic selves. And so because we have this negative self-talk going on in our heads, anytime we have an interaction with someone, that negative self-talk pops back into the picture. And so we believe it. We think, oh my gosh, that person thinks that I'm not smart. They think that I'm not making great decisions. They think I'm a bad parent. They think that I am not making as much money as I really am, that I'm making bad financial choices. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so what we do is that we, in our minds, measure up in a way that makes us inadequate, not good, subpar, defective, all of the above, anything negative that you can think of. And so when we become so focused on this other person's perspective of us and what they think about us, what they feel about us, what they say about us, honestly, that is soul sucking. It zaps the joy and the happiness right out of us. And it leaves us tired at the end of the day. And it really doesn't help you show up and be the best version of yourself because you're second guessing yourself. You're questioning yourself. You're thinking, oh my gosh, what could I have done differently? And almost living in a place of regret. At least that's what I was doing. So a perfect example of this was working on projects with my kids, but also being at mom groups. And so there was one time where we had a play date and my daughter was being a complete brat and wouldn't share, and I yelled at her. And looking back, yelling at her wasn't the best way to handle the situation. But then I became so concerned of what this other mom thought of me because I yelled at my kid because she was being a brat. Instead of saying to myself, you know what, this is how I'm making the choice to parent my child. This is what I think is right for my child in this moment. And move forward, I thought, oh my gosh, this mom thinks I'm a horrible mom. She's never going to come over and, hang out with me again. She doesn't want to have coffee with me again. She doesn't want to have her kid around my kid. And it was just this never-ending self-talk that just never added up. But we do this because this has happened before. So this is a pattern. And so we're running this pattern of questioning someone else's perception of us because we question the perception that we have of ourselves. At the end of the day, we think, oh my gosh, could I have said that differently? Could I have done that differently? Should I have worn that? Should I have not worn that? Should I have bought that? Should I have not bought that? Should I have eaten that for breakfast, lunch, dinner? Whatever the case may be. And so if we don't hold ourselves in a high regard, then we'll never measure up to ourselves or in someone else's perception of us. So really, it can be hard if this is a pattern you've been running for a very long time, since childhood. And so it's really can be hard to break it. But the first step is awareness. And so recognizing that you're running the pattern of being focused on someone else's perception, it's a safety mechanism. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be disliked. We don't want to be thought of poorly. We don't want that. And so when we start running this loop, typically it's because we've said something and then we're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And you go into your brain and overanalyze and, replay it over and over in your mind. Or someone has given you their feedback. So maybe they've said to you, oh, I wouldn't have worn that shirt with those pants. Or, oh, I wouldn't have purchased that snack for my kids. Or I would have done this instead. And so we take that one piece of feedback that they're giving us and we hang on that instead of saying, you know what? This is my life. My opinion of how I live my life is what truly matters. We get so stuck on the negative or the not kind or the unexpected response that we receive from someone, rather than standing in our own truth and our own power and saying, you know what, this is the decision I've made. I've committed to this decision. If it didn't work this time, I'll review the situation and I'll look for feedback and make the decision myself based on my own feedback, my own analysis, and move forward in a different way. Not because someone said so, but because it resonates with us internally. Not some external source of feedback, criticism, judgment, or opinions, but stepping into what we think and feel, because honestly, at the end of the day, that's really all that we can control is what we think, say, feel, and do. And so if you find yourself getting stuck in this pattern of worrying about what other people perceive of you, ask yourself, is that my perception or their perception? If it's theirs, let them have it. It doesn't matter. And maybe that person isn't a serving person to have in your life anyway, or maybe it's that you have that person in your life in small doses. But it's really first asking yourself, whose perception is this? Are you happy with the decision that you made? Is that decision bringing you peace, joy, fulfillment, happiness, anything serving that you were looking for from that experience or that situation? If it is, then you need to stand true in that and hold fast to that and not let the perception of someone else sway you or change the way you think or feel about yourself. Because honestly, at the end of the day, you pay your bills. You have to lay your head down on your pillow at night and say, yep, this day I felt fulfilled, I felt happy, I felt joy, I felt productive, I felt comfortable in my own skin, and I know who I am and what I stand for. And if you can say that at the end of the day and really own it, that's all that matters. Because honestly, at the end of the day, that person isn't going to be there to pay your bills. That person isn't always going to be there to make your decisions for you. And also the other thing that I like to ask myself is, are they worried about how I'm perceiving them? Probably not. They're comfortable moving forward in their day. They're comfortable deciding how they're going to show up and the perceptions that they, have of themselves. They're not worried about how you perceive them. So don't give them that headspace in return. So really stand true in who you are and let the perception of others go. And I know sometimes it feels easier said than done, because I've been stuck in that trap of thinking like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done this. I should have said this differently. I should have done this differently. And at the end of the day, I can't go back and undo it. So all I can do is use that situation and learn from it and say, okay, this worked and this didn't work. This is okay, this is not okay. And whatever that looks like for you, however you define okay, not okay, serving, unserving for you. And that's the thing, is we all have our own gauge and our own way to determine what is serving for us and what is unserving for us. So what might be serving for me is not serving for you. What I perceive to be as a good choice, a good financial decision, an appropriate thing to say, might not be the case for you. And so, really just saying, you know what, I own me and I own the value that I have of myself. I own the experience that I have of myself, and really using that and moving forward, and letting go of other people's perceptions, because honestly, you have no control at the end of the day of how you measure up for them. You only can have control of how you measure up for yourself. So I hope that you find this helpful, and tune in next time for another video. Thanks so much for watching.